You know, it is one thing to seize the Iron Throne from the king's named heir and claim it as your own, but it is quite another thing to do that without even having a clear idea of who is in charge. That's what's going on with Team Green, though, and quite frankly, it's a bit of a mess. Like, if someone asked you who exactly was it that seized the Iron Throne from Rhaenyra, what name would you even give? Was it Aegon, who sits the throne, but who literally had to be dragged in kicking and screaming to do the job? Or was it Otto, who's been undermining Rhaenyra for about 2 decades now, and who had the credibility and standing with the people of King's Landing to declare Aegon the king at the coronation ceremony? Or was it Alicent, who seems to have the most direct influence and control over Aegon, who was the only witness to Viserys' final words, which she claims named Aegon his heir, and who effectively took control of Otto's coup and dictated the final terms that were offered to Rhaenyra? And then in terms of who is actually prosecuting the war effort going forward for Team Green, of course we have Sir Christen Cole, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, who is the only one with actual battle experience on Team Green, and who we have seen from the Season 2 trailer becomes Aegon's Hand of the King at some point in the season. Sir Christen Cole also added a very important layer of legitimacy to Aegon's coronation as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, so he bears responsibility for that too. And of course, many of you will know, in Fire and Blood, he is nicknamed the Kingmaker and held up as an example of dishonorable Kingsguard behavior for that reason. And then there's this guy. Yeah, him. That's right. Edgelord Supreme and fan favorite Aemond One-Eye Targaryen. The man who rides the largest and most dangerous dragon in Westeros, Nana Vhagar. Aemond and Vhagar are probably the ones who pushed this thing past the point of no return and into open warfare, and of course this was the first dragon-on-dragon kill and the first kinslaying of the war. So he definitely gets some credit for getting it started. Ooh, Visenya, look at me. I got one of those trendy eye gems the kids are getting these days. Oh, I see you got one too already. Well, ain't that just a quinky dink? I guess we're like sisters now. Man, where did that original Nana Vhagar voice and humor come from? That was crazy. Anyways, yeah, I count at least 5 cooks in the kitchen, and this is more or less what happens when you try to use a young and inexperienced prince as the figurehead of your rebellion. It's kind of like you're seeding a power vacuum directly onto the Iron Throne. So the puppeteers all want Aegon to be a figurehead that they can control, but they also want him to be a strong king, or at least to be able to sell him as one. And everyone around the king will be looking to exploit his inexperience and proclivities to further their own interests. So to paraphrase Donald Rumsfeld, of all people, you go to coup with the coup plotters you got. That's right. And though the personalities may be at odds at times, there's definitely some serious muscle, skill, intelligence, cunning, and raw dragon power the Team Green can bring to bear. So let's dive into this rolling ball of chaos and talk about all the joy that it will bring everyone in Season 2. Well, technically it is used, but only slightly. It's in great condition. Okay, yes, I'll take 80 for it. That's great. I'll get it shipped out tomorrow. Alright, cheers. Hey Rhaegar, you aren't by chance selling my stuff to people online, are you? Well, I sure am, Dave. You've got a lot of nice stuff, and there's a lot of profit to be made here. But that's my YouTube plaque. It has my name on it. It's obviously mine. It's not yours to sell. Well, Dave, I don't see you doing anything to stop me, so you must not care. Rhaegar, where's this energy coming from? We're supposed to be friends, man. I let you sleep on my couch. And I do appreciate that, Dave, which is why I wasn't actually selling your stuff. That's right. But online data brokers are selling your stuff, including your personal information, which does have your name on it, just like this YouTube plaque, and you're not doing anything about it. I see. It's very, very clever, Rhaegar. What would be really clever is protecting your privacy with today's sponsor, Incogni. There are hundreds of commercial databases and people search sites that hold your personal information and sell it to, well, pretty much anyone, Dave, and these online data brokers are a big reason why identity theft cases are up 41.5% in just the last 3 years. Wow, that's actually much worse than someone selling my YouTube plaque. Well, good news, Dave. You actually have the right to request that these data brokers delete the information that they hold about you. Oh yeah, cool. So I'll just start looking up these hundreds of companies and calling them. That doesn't sound tedious or frustrating at all. Tut tut, Dave. This is a happy occasion. and Incogni can do all of that stuff for you anyway. Incogni reaches out to data brokers on your behalf, requests your personal data removal, and deals with any objections from their side. And as long as you have their service, which is very affordable by the way, Incogni will continue protecting your data privacy by taking care of any new records that pop up. Well, thank goodness, because I'd really rather spend my time making YouTube videos as opposed to arguing with data brokers. Well, Dave, getting started with Incogni is easy. Just create an account, give Incogni the right to go to work for you, and sit back and watch the results as Incogni removes your data and updates you on the progress. And I'm guessing that Incogni's given us a special promo link to give to our viewers, right? Too right, Dave, too right. It's incogni.com/Lightbringer. And our people can get 60% off a monthly or an annual subscription. Incogni.com/Lightbringer. That is easy to remember. Now, can you hang my YouTube plaque back on my wall, please? Gosh, I completely forgot to mention Larys Strong. He certainly thinks he's running things too, doesn't he? Well, that's actually a good place to start with. The basic fact that while 4 of the members of Team Green that we're talking about, Otto, Alicent, Aegon, and Aemond, are nuclear family who are connected by the bonds of blood, Sir Christen Cole and Lord Larys Strong have a bit more complicated ties to Team Green. This means that Otto, Alicent, Aegon, and Aemond all broadly share the same goal of securing the throne for their family, even if their individual personalities sometimes pull in different directions. With the other 2, we have to dive a little deeper into their motivations, into what makes them tick, if you will. So let's start with Christen and Larys and then work our way back to the family. Sir Christen Cole does certainly seem to be motivated for a win for the Team Green family, it must be said. But for him, it's obviously a bit more personal in that he's nursing this huge grudge against Rhaenyra for the past decade and a half or so. His house of Cole is very minor, so his place at court is not at all guaranteed in the same way that the members of the family are, or even that of Larys Strong, who is Lord of House Strong. Christen was first elevated to the Kingsguard by Princess Rhaenyra, of course, and then presumably his life and position were protected by Queen Alicent after his dishonorable murder of Sir Joffrey Lonmouth in open court. Who, by the way, remember, is a war hero from the Stepstones, not just Laenor's boyfriend. Sir Christen Cole has essentially served as Alicent's instrument since then, and he's even loyal to her above Otto or the other members of Team Green, or even the previous Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Sir Harold Westerling. And we saw this when everyone was searching for Aegon, right? Christen was the one Alicent sent, who brought Aegon back to Alicent. Christen Cole had no problem sort of manslaughtering old Lord Beesbury into the table, into one of those little, ow. I don't think he meant to kill him, so that's why I call it manslaughtering. But yeah, he had no problem doing that for a perceived slight against Alicent's honor. And then he had no problem drawing his sword right in the face of his previous Lord Commander, Harold Westerling, when he chastised him for the killing of Lord Beesbury. So yeah, he rides for Allison pretty hard. And then after Harold Westerling's principled resignation at that council meeting, Alicent then elevated Christen Cole to Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. So he does have a certain amount of political power now. But again, I will point out that it is given to him by the nobles and therefore can be taken away just as easily. And I mention this because you get the feeling that Christen is keenly aware of that, and that this sort of contributes to his general edgy vibe, and probably what makes him so willing to jettison honor and principle in favor of total victory. I mentioned Christen's battle experience that comes from the Dornish marches, and of course that is the reason Rhaenyra put him on the Kingsguard to begin with. This is a peaceful time in Westeros, and not very many knights or lords have battle experience. So along with his actual direct martial prowess, that experience and knowledge and tactics is kind of what Christen is bringing to the table for Team Green. So expect him to be eager to go into battle. That's where he can really prove his worth, and that's where he can work off some of that excess rage that he's got going on. As I mentioned, the Season 2 trailer shows us that Christen will be elevated to Aegon's Hand of the King, which makes a certain amount of sense since Otto is more like a peacetime hand, and Christen is more of a wartime hand who will lead on the battlefield from the front, and he is essentially Team Green's top general, although Aemond might rank there as well. I was kind of joking about the rage, kind of kidding, not kidding, right? But obviously Christen is aggressive and violent, and will seek to prosecute the war in like manner. The line from Aegon in Fire and Blood when he elevates Christen to hand is quite telling. He says, "My new hand is a steel fist." Now Larys Strong, He's the real wild card here, both because of his seeming psychopathy and because no one really knows quite what his game is. He's Alicent's informant, but we can't quite call him her ally, now can we? He is serving her interests, but he's doing so while essentially blackmailing her against ever removing him from his position by always making sure that her hands are dirty in his dirty deeds. He's made himself indispensable to Alicent in that only he can provide her the information that she needs, and then he went further by making her complicit in the murder of Larys' father and brother, Lionel and Harwin Strong, at Harrenhal. That was done in order to create a vacancy in the office of Hand of the King so that Otto would be invited back to King's Landing to help Alicent. So once Larys reveals to Alicent that he did it in order to help her, she either kind of has to arrest him or she is then made complicit. And she doesn't want to give up the information source, so there you go. And then there's the fact that the only form of payment that Larys, I close my eyes as I prepare to say this, the only form of payment that Larys will accept at times for his information is Alicent showing him her feet so he can masturbate in front of her. That's right, I said it, the M word. Might as well say it, it's what's happening. It's a twisted kind of psychological and sexual abuse, obviously, that Alicent has basically convinced herself that she has to put up with for the good of the family and the good of the realm. One even notices the echoed line of Alicent complaining that the hour is quite late, both in the scene in episode 9 where Larys is waiting for her in her chamber and we see the foot thing for the first time, as well as the scene in episode 4 where Alicent is summoned late at night to Viserys' bedchamber for his sexual pleasure. If we're psychoanalyzing here, I believe that Alicent's sense of virtue largely comes from her having suffered all of this kind of stuff as a part of doing her duty, and again, for the sake of her family and the realm. But let's go ahead and stick with Larys for a second, as unpleasant as that is. Larys Strong really highlights the reason why I made this video, which is the potential for chaos amongst the leadership of Team Green. For example, in episode 9 alone, we saw Larys offer to sell Otto Alicent's secrets as soon as Otto arrived in King's Landing, and then just a little bit later we saw Larys tell Alicent about the vast spy network throughout the Red Keep that Otto has been taking advantage of, and which allowed Otto to initially be the first one to locate Aegon. Larys then says he knows who the weaver of this web of informants is and offers to remove her, and of course he's talking about Mysaria the White Worm here, and of course Larys does indeed set fire to her residence at the end of the episode, although pretty much everyone suspects that she wasn't home at the time. I wonder if Alicent realizes that Larys almost certainly discovered this spy network by torturing her maid, Tayla. That's right, if you pay close attention, Tayla is taken down to the dungeons and left in Larys' care right after Viserys dies, simply because she's one of the only people that knows and they're trying to keep the word contained. But then a little bit later, Larys appears to Allison and he's like, oh yes, I've discovered a vast spy network and Tayla is part of it. So it's like, where did he find that out? From Tayla. And how did he find... It wasn't nice, I'm sure. So as you can see, and this is kind of the overarching point, Larys is more than happy to exploit whatever differences exist between the different members of the Team Green nuclear family, and that makes him a chaos agent. Alicent obviously knows how twisted Larys is, that's obvious, and you gotta think Otto at least has some inkling as to what kind of player of the Game of Thrones Larys is. But obviously the price of information in this world is at a premium, and so neither Otto or Alicent can quit Larys. However, it's important to realize that the only kind of trust that someone like Otto or Alicent or King Aegon could ever put in Larys is a kind of trust in his ambition, in the idea that he has affixed his political fortunes to those of Team Green. But this is kind of like the proverb about the frog carrying the scorpion across the river. The scorpion asks the frog for a ride. The scorpion's like, no, bro, you are a scorpion. And the scorpion's like, hey, I won't sting you. I wouldn't do that. Then we both drown. And so the frog's like, all right, that makes sense. And yet halfway across the river, the scorpion stings the frog anyway. And as they're drowning, the frog asks why. And the scorpion's like, hey, it's my nature. So Larys killed his own family to rise to power, and thus there's no question about what his nature is, and about what kind of stratagems he devises to solve problems. Arson, in particular, seems to be his favorite. Maybe he's a fan of the movie Backdraft. Team Green is the frog here. They're even the right color. And the only question is how far across the river will they get before Larys starts stinging. He's riding Team Green to power, like the scorpion rides the frog, but Team Green has several frogs, and Larys might decide that, he doesn't really need all of them to make it across the river for him to win. Alright, so we mentioned that Otto seems set to lose his chain of office of Hand of the King in Season 2 to Sir Christen Cole. Very sad. So let's talk about Otto and his slipping hold on power. Otto became a master at wielding power indirectly during the reign of King Viserys, essentially puppeting and manipulating those around him, including the king himself. He certainly reminds us of characters like Littlefinger or Varys in that. And even though Otto is more highborn than Peter or Varys, he is a second son, and thus only a landed knight of House Hightower, technically. He doesn't even possess a castle, for example. Otto does have the backing of his house, of course, which is very powerful, being based out of Old Town, the oldest, richest, and largest city in Westeros, which is, of course, the home of the famous Hightower, the Citadel, where the Maesters are based out of, and the Starry Sept, where the Faith of the Seven is based out of. So that's a huge concentration of political power, social power, and financial power. Although Otto has, for the most part, gotten the better of his opponents in the Game of Thrones so far, there is a kind of vulnerability to indirect power in that it sometimes has no answer in the face of direct power. One recalls Cersei Lannister sort of demonstrating this concept to Peter Baelish when she has her guard seize him and is like, "Power is power, Lord Baelish."
Cut his throat. Stop. Wait. I've changed my mind. Let him go.
So along the same lines, we've watched Otto successfully cajole and steer Alicent in the handling of Viserys and her son Aegon, but Alicent began to stand up to him when it was time to pull the coup. And, of course, it seems as though Aegon will at some point look Otto in the face and say, "Sorry, grandfather.
Power is power.
I'm the king, and you're fired." Still, Otto has incredible political knowledge, extensive contacts throughout the realm, and he's also the connection to the military power of House Hightower through his brother Hobart, who is the Lord of House Hightower. So it's likely Otto won't be sidelined completely, even if he isn't Hand of the King. I mean, you know what they say about idle hands and causing trouble. I also want to take a moment to highlight what Otto's original plan was for seizing the throne. That is, putting Rhaenyra and her children to death, and Daemon as well. So even though Otto sometimes seems cautious and calculating, it's a Tywin Lannister kind of cautious and calculating, if you see what I mean. Otto is certainly patient, having waited years to pull this coup, as opposed to arranging for the sudden and mysterious deaths of Viserys or Rhaenyra years earlier. But when the moment came, he certainly had no queasiness about making a few sacrifices to put Aegon on the throne, as he says. Thus, to whatever extent any members of Team Green are still listening to Otto's advice, don't be surprised if that advice is a touch on the ruthless side. Dowager Queen Alicent Hightower is pretty much the central figure for Team Green. The link between the older generations of power brokers like Otto, Hobart, and dead King Viserys to the younger generation of ascendant royals who are, of course, Alicent's children. The key moment for Alicent comes when the Green Coup is launched, and this is a moment that some fans have criticized for being changed from the book. The show added the dynamic of Otto sort of trying to strong-arm Alicent into doing the coup the way he wants. Which, again, meant sending assassins to Dragonstone to kill Rhaenyra and her family. And, by the way, let us remember King Viserys the Peaceful, who was all of our friend. Amen, yes. And now let's get back to making plans to killing his daughter, brother, and grandchildren. So yes, at the small council meeting called immediately following King Viserys' death, it is revealed that Otto has been plotting to put Aegon on the throne and how to do it with the other members of the small council, but without Alicent. And now Otto is using a kind of shock and awe of rapid war planning to try to overwhelm Alicent and ram this thing through before she can object. Alicent is able to put the brakes on this with a little help from the principled resignation of Sir Harold Westerling, former Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. And then ensues the race to find and secure King Aegon, whom Otto and Alicent apparently, you'll notice, look at as a complete puppet where all you have to do is possess him and then you can sort of control what he wants to do. But think about it. The fact that Otto was doing all this planning without Alicent, which is the thing people are complaining about, is very important. It shows that Otto is still treating Alicent like a pawn. and a puppet, as opposed to a co-collaborator, even though she's been queen for like 2 decades. Alicent finally sees this clearly and calls Otto out on it later in the episode, essentially stating the fact that he has been using her in this fashion her whole life, and that she doesn't even know what she might have wanted had she been allowed to have hopes and dreams for herself, because all she ever wanted was what Otto sort of gave her to want. Now, I'm not sure if this will cause Alicent to reflect on the fact that she has sort of done the same thing to Aegon, but maybe, who knows? We'll keep an eye on it. In any case, Christen Cole and Aemond are able to secure Aegon for Alicent and thus put her in control of the coup plotting. She then is able to dictate terms to Otto, which involves sending him to Dragonstone with a message. So instead of sending assassins, we're sending terms to Rhaenyra, which Alicent considers reasonable as a sort of last-ditch attempt to avoid war. So here again, some people have complained that this makes Alicent a weaker character with less agency. However, I would strongly disagree with that, and here's why. Agency isn't about simple bloodlust, of course, but rather the ability to make your own decisions. And Alicent even says, reluctance to murder is not a weakness, and that's exactly what I mean. Alicent taking control of the coup, even if she didn't know about it originally, and then doing it her way, is actually the definition of agency. And what's interesting to me is that this moment of finally standing up to her father is only coming as she is placing her own son on the throne when he's a grown adult. It definitely highlights the weight of the puppet strings from the older generation onto the shoulders of the younger, right? Because of course, with all the politics attached to this, it's not a simple matter of just standing up to dad, telling your father you're a grown-ass adult now. Your entire house and potentially the kingdom is at stake here. But yeah, in any case, Alicent has finally stood up to Otto, and now, ironically, essentially finds herself in his shoes, in that she's trying to manage her own children as they turn into adults and become politicians, and even now, generals in war. Of course, even with these differences in opinion on how to prosecute the coup, at the end of the day, we saw Alicent and Otto working together to coronate Aegon and place him on the Iron Throne. And there was much rejoicing. Otto and Alicent have a long and complicated relationship, but they're still very close, and we should expect Otto to retain a fairly sizable influence on Alicent going forward. It's definitely going to be fun to watch 3 generations of this sort of puppeteering try to run a kingdom, and that's kind of what this video is all about. And that brings us to the younger generation and King Aegon II Targaryen, rider of Sunfire the Golden Dragon. I already did a longer Season 2 preview video for Aegon called Aegon Unleashed, which all of you have doubtless watched. Thank you very much. So I don't want to repeat everything that I said there, but you can kind of already see how this is shaping up. Aegon was obviously reluctant, to say the least, to play the role of king at first, but we all saw that transformation take place when he held up the sword Blackfire in front of that cheering crowd. Now, yes, a dragon and dragon lord did burst up through the floor of that cheering crowd, killing hundreds of people, and that is a kind of bad omen for a dragon king coronation ceremony. However, I'm guessing that that's only going to give Aegon fuel for the fire. He probably won't care about the symbolism. The Season 2 trailer and the images we've seen released definitely show us an Aegon that's firmly embracing the role of king. And the vibe we get from him is something along the lines of, hey, you guys foisted this upon me, you guys made me fight this war, and now I'm gonna do it the way that I see fit. Aegon, again, of course, has a big, beautiful golden dragon, Sunfire, which is the kind of thing that gives a young dragon lord confidence and boldness, just in case the throne and the cheering crowd didn't do the trick. Will it be enough confidence for Aegon to take his Sunfire into battle? It's obviously very tricky for the monarchs of either side, Aegon or Rhaenyra, to risk their royal persons in war. But there are only a few dragons on either side, and it's pretty unlikely that either team will be able to win without committing all of their dragons at some point. This will be a fascinating dynamic to watch both teams try to navigate, and it's not hard to picture a scene where Otto and Allison are trying to tell Aegon, no, it's too dangerous, and he's like, I am the king and power is power, and I'm going to do what I want to do. He won't use that voice. I don't know where that came from, but you get the idea. One other note on Aegon, the Season 2 trailer seems to show us Aegon taking a direct hand, if you will, in punishing a prisoner, down in the dungeons of the Red Keep, with Larys Strong sort of hovering in the background. Those who know Fire and Blood can probably fill in some of the details here, but you really don't need to in order to do some analysis. This is a darker side of Aegon that is coming to the surface and seemingly being empowered by Lord Larys, who is pretty much the darkest character on the show. Definitely the darkest character on the show. One wonders how far down this road Aegon might go, and how having direct access to Larys and his secrets and his ability to do murders might empower Aegon in all the wrong ways. After all, he's the king and he's an adult, so he doesn't really need to check with Otto or Alicent before doing something impulsive. And it's easy to imagine Aegon thinking some of Larys' darker suggestions are, good actually. As we mentioned, Lord Larys pretty much operates by exploiting people's weaknesses and their desires and proclivities. So yeah, this is definitely a partnership made in hell. Or actually, no, it was made in Alicent's bedchamber, where she's been facilitating this monster for years, despite her own victimization by Otto and by Lord Larys himself. So whatever trouble Larys causes with Aegon will really just be chickens coming home to roost. And speaking of chickens coming home to roost, the same goes for the flea-bottom cockfighting rings. Child fighting rings that have been allowed to flourish there. That's where Aegon has been working out some of his excess trauma. The fighting pits where orphan children have their teeth filed and their nails pointed so they could fight each other like feral creatures for the entertainment of the crowd. The crowd being Aegon in their number. These places have been tolerated by the crown for years, as Mysaria explains to us. The Gold Cloaks have been all too happy to take bribes to look the other way, essentially. And not only has Aegon been frequenting these places, we see that he's even left at least one, and probably more, of his own bastards to just sort of become absorbed into this scene. Now, as far as Aegon sort of just diving into all this, I would say that this is done in an attempt to run from the role that his mother and grandfather have been trying to foist upon him since the moment they gave him the conqueror's name of Aegon. And more importantly, I want to point out that this darkness will continue to need to find an outlet, a way to manifest. Even after Aegon has undergone transformation and is now embracing the role of king, can you see how these elements could combine in a bad way? Beating the living tar out of a captive in the black cells is probably only a preview of where this is going to go. All right, so far we've talked about essentially Aegon and the four people who will be trying to puppet him. But you know who might have more influence on Aegon than anyone? That's right, Aemond One-Eye, Aemond Kinslayer. Prince Aemond Targaryen technically doesn't really have a lot of political power compared to everyone else that we're talking about. But of course, he rides the largest dragon, Nana Vhagar, as we all know. And he also possesses a kind of implacable determination that is palpable to everyone around him. Even though Aemond is the second-born and younger than Aegon by somewhere between a year to 2 years, he kind of feels more like the older brother, right? And this is not just because Ewan Mitchell is tall and intimidating looking. They cast him to fit the role, which he does in spades. Tom Glencarney, by the way, short and intimidating, so don't undersell him either. Fire and Blood Aemond, Book Aemond if you will, is every bit as formidable a presence as Show Aemond, and his personality certainly seems meant to play off that of Aegon. And even as Aemond is wrestling his brother Aegon to the ground, physically dragging him back to do the thing that he doesn't want to do, we can still tell from the dialogue and the acting that Aemond and Aegon do share a close bond. We know that Aemond does judge his brother Aegon for his shortcomings and has been doing so at least since their teenage years, but Aemond nevertheless supports his brother's claim with full vigor. And you get the feeling that the more seriously Aegon takes the war, the more he will be aligned with Aemond. So yeah, the brothers are pretty different, and in a vacuum, Aemond is definitely more qualified to be king. He fits the role better. However, Aegon is king, and it's not hard to see how having someone like Aemond at his back with Vhagar enforcing his rule will make him even more confident, again, in case the throne and the black fire sword and the crowd and the crown didn't do it. Oh yeah, and Sunfire. Aegon's going to be very confident. So Aemond is kind of like a pillar, right? Solid. The kind of presence that the rest of Team Green can lean on for support and draw strength from. And we've seen that in multiple scenes already, I think. This is, of course, not just warfare, but dragon warfare, and it's probably the case that no single dragon can stand against mighty Vhagar. I've pointed out before that with only a few dragons on each side, and of course with the fact that each dragon can only be ridden by one rider at a time, the normal politics of kings and generals, and shout out to the YouTube channel of the same name, who most of us probably watch, are much different. The politics are much different. It's as if each side only had a couple of B-52 bomber jets and only a couple of pilots who can fly them. Those pilots instantly become very powerful politically. And so it is with anyone that can ride a dragon for either side. So even though Aemond is just a prince in terms of Red Keep royal politics, he's the only one with the keys to Nana-Vhagar, and thus everyone's going to have to listen to him if he has an idea or a suggestion. And by listen, I mean at least consider it, obviously. For example, when Allison was trying to keep Aemond from joining Christen Cole in the hunt for Aegon in episode 9, Aemond is able to smoothly reassure, but also override his mother and go join him anyway, saying, hey, look, I know where Aegon hangs out too. So overall, Aemond is probably the biggest one to keep an eye on as far as being an X factor for Team Green. How Aemond feels about other people's choices and how free he feels to make his own choices will go a long way to determining the path that the war will take. As we all remember, Aemond spilled the first dragon rider blood of the war, and flying on Nana-Vhagar's back, it's easy to see that he is set up to spill more. I think the big question going forward is whether Aemond will use his dragon more strategically or more based out of emotion. So for example, choosing to taunt Luke with Vhagar was an emotional indulgence clearly motivated by a need for revenge as opposed to a calculated action. And it led to Aemond losing control of Vhagar and then to the death of Luke and Arrax. And subsequently to the war, again, crossing the point of no return when his mom was actually still trying to negotiate. I, for one, do expect Aemond to be more strategic going forward. But we've already seen that underneath what appears to be a tightly controlled demeanor lurks a beast beneath the boards. I'm so sorry, but I had to say it. Everything is the beast beneath the boards. I am very interested to see how Aemond spins what happened at Storm's End with Luke and Arrax when he gets back to King's Landing. And of course, how everyone reacts. And I've said that I suspect he will claim to have done it strategically instead of admitting that he lost control of his dragon. But it could be that, there will be someone that he confides to. And I'm wondering if that someone might be Aegon, who, like Aemond, is a young dragon rider and could probably use all the information and feedback about what it's like to fly your dragon in war. I'd love to see these two brothers consulting with one another on the nature of dragon riding as they learn the ropes. So far, I think House of the Dragon has done a fabulous job of fleshing out and expanding the details of all the dragon lore. So hopefully we'll see a little more of it here. So the last thing I'll say about Aemond is that it is easy to see a certain alignment between him and Christen Cole, who are both very serious people, not given to indulgence and very focused on the military aspect of this war, as opposed to the political aspect. You might look, what's the military aspect of a war? It's all military. No, as opposed to the political aspect. If Christen Cole is the ground general for Team Green, then Aemond might be the air captain, let's say, assuming that Aegon will only fly his dragon into battle at great need. Most of the time, it will probably be Aemond leading the fight. Here's Aemond and Christen planning the war together. And it's easy to see the natural chemistry. Expect these two to be especially focused on Daemon and what he does, since Daemon is essentially the counterpart for Team Black for Christen and Aemond, being Chief War Leader and Chief Dragon Rider. So, who's in charge? It's hard to say. Everyone's got their finger in the pie a little bit. So let's do this. In the comments, why don't you rank them 1 through 6 in terms of who will have the most say in determining the direction that Team Green takes during the war? I hope I've done a good job of showing all the different motivations and through lines of the different characters of the Team Green Brain Trust. And please give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you want more videos like this in your feed. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.